Good morning, everybody. This is Diggs. It's another beautiful day out here in the Pacific Northwest, and today we're going to be continuing our Elemental series videos, focusing on fire element this time. We're going to be focusing on the units of fire, which ones are must-haves, kind of what the other units bring to the table. We'll also be talking about the fire element as a whole, and we'll be talking about what's coming out in the future. That's going to be all of the new units like Valentine's Ildira. We're also going to talk about some of the upgrades that potentially Raldor is going to get, or Winter Mashery, right? So let's go ahead and dig in. So before I even jump in and start talking about all of these units, I think it's important to acknowledge that fire has never really been the meta-defining element. In terms of all of the elements, if you think about them, almost every element has had a moment for it to shine in the sun, and fire has never really had that moment. Simultaneously, fire has kind of a confused identity. You have fire slash units, you have fire magic units, you have fire tank units, you have fire missile units, but you never really have enough of those types of units to put together a specific formation, right? You're never going to be able to run like a triple missile fire formation right now. You could potentially run a triple fire magic composition. Maybe you could use Terra and, Glacier in some capacity, but compared to other elements and other units in the game, you're not going to be able to put together those like powerhouse compositions that say lightning has, or have the diverse types of compositions that water has. Fire does one thing very well, and the one thing that fire does really well is it's a very defensive element. Now, of course, we've seen recently Terra coming out, we've seen Satya coming out, and they've been really powerful and add a lot of power level to fire. And I would argue Terra has actually made fire a little bit more relevant as a unit. But I think we still are looking at fire as an element because of the VCs, because of the espers, primarily as a defensive element. You see the units tend to have a lot more buffs for themselves and a lot more breaks for themselves and a lot less debuffs, right? Specifically, lowering defense, lowering slash resistance. Like, you tend to not see that in these compositions. So, we're going to keep that in mind going through here. I think if you're a newer player watching this video, one thing to keep in mind is that fire is definitely one of the most complex units in the game. I think, of course, fire has probably the most powerful MR units in the game. But I think if you are looking to get into the game and you're looking to kind of start with an element, fire is definitely not going to be it. I think universally in fire, the must-haves, before anything else, we're talking before being competitive in PvP, we're talking like you're growing your account, probably King Mont and Rain. King Mont for a long time has just universally been a very powerful tank. PvE wise, he has access to slash resistance down. He has a 3x hit. He can berserk the opponents in PvP. Even nowadays, King Mont could be viable if you were a beginner player in PvP. If you're going into a really difficult PvE mission, King Mont is slotted in as a tank almost universally. Very similar to Engelbert. I think he does his job better than Engelbert though. Rain is another interesting unit because he is going to be getting upgrades here in the near future. And Rain is kind of like the foundation of fire slash, which is going to be, if you're putting together a PvE composition and you're wanting to chain kind of damage or potentially chain, against an enemy, Rain is the one that has access to defense and spirit break. He has fire lowering 38 resistance. He has a 3x hit attack. He's very powerful at, bringing in that PvE power. He's also a tank. He also has access to native enmity generation. So between him and King Mont, I think they really carry the element. And I would argue, Terra is probably the most important unit PvP wise for fire right now. Similarly, Satya is also very important for PvP, but I think at its foundation, at the very rock bottom of fire, that you really where you need to start is going to be with King Mont and with Rain. Now, in terms of PvP, Terra, of course, has kind of dominated the market right now. you know, it's definitely, Terra is definitely not quote unquote meta, as I've said in many different videos. She is a limited time unit. She has access to guts. She has access to 6 100% hit based attacks. She has access to Esper, you know, generation. I think she's a unit that's going to be generally future proof. I think there's a couple of reasons for this. I think Terra, you know, she's proven that she can kind of deal damage and kind of destroy in PvP, but fire doesn't necessarily really have that PvP composition right now to make fire kind of universally dominant, right? Terra is going to have to wait. Right, Terra's gonna have to wait for her turn to be meta, kind of like Satya kind of had this resurgence with Terra emerging, right? Very similar to Glacier as well. She's also had this resurgence with Terra arriving. I think Terra's true power is gonna come out in the future, and I think it's going to come whenever we get maybe a global exclusive, you know, potential fire unit, something where we can pair that with her to really kind of bring the destruction to the enemy team. I also think Terra is interesting in that she is one of the unique units in the game that has Esper build gauge. And I do wonder if in the future we may see some type of an Esper meta. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but it's always something in the back of my mind when I'm looking at a unit like her. She's powerful, she's versatile, she brings something to the table that's completely unique to other units. So I do think there's a possibility that we could see her become a powerhouse in the future, more than she already is right now. Satya, also an interesting unit. You'll notice she's the only unit with 2 rows here, both PvE and PvP, very powerful. She has access to reflex, which is something to never underestimate. She can lower defense by 25. She can dispel re-raise. She has barrier break. She can lower fire resistance by 38. She's just universally a good, powerful unit in both PvE and PvP. She's not the carry unit though right now. I would argue she is kind of a support unit, and I think you may see her either be part of a really 3-man powerful composition in the near future, or you're just going to see her kind of in this support role that she's kind of in right now with Terra or with other fire units. She's going to be a little bit difficult to utilize in PvE as well, if you're going for like Trials of Reckoning content or other, because yes, she lowers fire resistance, yes, she lowers, you know, defense 25, but you're going to want her to do that, and you're going to want her to chain slash. So you may actually be utilizing her in like a chaining fire composition, not necessarily a chaining fire slash composition. So just knowing where she's going to fit in is going to be pretty important. And she's one of those units, you know, that I've talked about with fire here, that is very complex to actually implement and use. There's no unit in fire that is going to be like Elena, right? Where you just set Elena and she's going to be good no matter what. Every unit in fire needs to be tuned, especially if you're running them in PvP, and especially if you're wanting them to run their auto AI in kind of a really good way. Fire Glacier is also a very powerful fire unit. I think Fire Glacier's time in PvP has kind of passed. She's never really kind of had a time to shine, and I think we're gonna see her mostly used for PvE content nowadays. She is very powerful. She can take a hit, she can heal herself with geo absorption. She does have a 3x hit. She's one of the only units in the game that can lower magic resistance, and she can lower it by 38, which makes her relevant in potentially some universal magic comps. We've seen times where Kilfei is utilized for her limit break. However, Kilfei can chain light with Holy. So, you know, Kilfei has the unique aspect that she has access to a light element magic attack, whereas, you know, Fire Glacier here doesn't. But definitely Fire Glacier not a unit to underestimate. And with second masteries coming around, particularly with how some of these second masteries, like for Rain, he gets an insane secondary mastery buff. You know, I would never underestimate Fire Glacier making a quick comeback, particularly paired with Terra. I kind of struggled on putting Luartha on this list, but I feel like as a older player, I underestimate the relevance of Luartha being free, and I think many older players do. And I think about how much I use Lucia, right? I use Lucia so much, just kind of through my entire journey of 4 divisions, because she had access to quadruple shot. And you know, Lucia is one of those units that has made, you know, chaining missions easy for me. I can just slot her in. I still slot her in nowadays. But for a lot of new players entering into the game, you know, they might not have Lucia, but they can get Luartha for free. And Luartha does have quadruple shot, and she has access to sub soldier. So she's going to be a very powerful, you know, addition as a new player, and you're going to be able to hit those elemental chaining missions. So I think, you know, even though Luartha may not be the strongest PvE unit or the strongest PvP unit, I think for a lot of new players, she's going to be kind of a keystone unit, very similar to how we still, all of us, use Lucia to get our chain 4 missions, right? So I think for a lot of new generation players, Luartha is going to be that kind of get chain 4 and be happy with it, right? I want to transition to talking about the UR units, but I actually, like, I feel like the rest of the fire UR units are like less exciting than the MR units, because I feel like the MR units are such monstrosities of power. Like, there's literally not an MR unit in fire that is useless. Like, you can use all of them. I mean, case in point, I used Miche recently in my MR PvP video, but let's just go over them real quickly. We of course have Minwu here, who is the Select Quest Fire unit. She's pretty much the fire element healer. Very good. She's very good at what she does. She has access to Esanaga. She has access to Ultima. Her primary fire offensive attack can actually sleep the opponent. You know, since fire is such a defensive element, having access to Minwu and having the ability to heal with her, very great, very powerful. But she doesn't really bring anything to the actual element or to your team. What I mean by that is her sole role is going to be that time when you need to manually control a healer. Like, that's pretty much the only time you're going to use her. Elda is quite quickly outdated. He just got his second mastery, but it just wasn't enough. It kind of turned his limit break into a tanking ability. He's kind of this crit penetration monster. He actually has pierce penetration in his kit with his new EX, but it's not going to be enough. Elda is definitely going to be one of those situations that you kind of want to stay away from. Similarly, we're going to talk about Summer Ketone, Raldor, and Delita. Pretty much the only UR unit here that I would consider investing in if I was a new player would be Winter Mashery. Winter Mashery is unique in that she's limited. She has access to reflex. She can lower defense. She has 100% hit attack, right? So she has piercing attack. She has missile attack. She has slashing attack. She's going to just universally be an all-out kind of brawler for fire. And fire kind of, you know, lacks these really powerful offensive units, and that's what she kind of brings to the table. And with her second mastery coming any week now, it's probably due to come out this week or next week, I think you wouldn't be in a bad position if you did pull for her. Looking at the other three on here though, Summer Ketone, technically she has access to breaks and she can sleep the opponent. She has access to fire minus 38. Someone got on me on the last video because I was talking about a Rune Knight character and I said they didn't have resistance down. The reason I didn't say they had resistance down, and the reason there's this frowny face near Summer Ketone, is there's no way you're going to get the auto AI to do that resistance down. And if you can't get the auto AI to do that resistance down, they might as well not have it, because any content that you're going to be doing is almost entirely going to be auto if you're in PvE. Unless you're going for like some specific like crazy ass hard content, which, you know, even then you're probably not doing it for the manual fire resistance minus 38. You know, it's one of those situations. Her AI will never use it. You know, she's never going to use it. And her as a unit, it's a struggle. People are fans of her. I just can't do it. I've never seen her be good. And I've never kind of utilized her in any capacity. Raldor is an interesting unit. He's kind of this brawler character. He is going to get his EX here soon, actually, in the next couple of weeks. He can lower strike resistance by 38. He has access to steal time. A lot of people are upset on the JP side about his EX. I think there was one content creator in particular that was really upset because he liked Raldor. I actually think Raldor's EX is not the worst. It gives him 100% hit attack, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But he is definitely one of those units where he fits that defensive aspect of fire, but he doesn't really deal a ton of offensive damage, and he doesn't really kind of carry an offensive fire team. And honestly, there's not really other fire strike units. So, you know, kind of the combination of all those factors, you're never going to be able to get a fire strike team, right? Kind of like we were talking about. Delita is actually an incredibly powerful unit, and a lot of you guys give me a hard time about magic Delita because I was like, oh, you're gonna use Delita as a magic unit. I guess he does have access to some attacks that are modified by magic, but you know, all kidding aside, Delita has the highest fire element break in the game. He can lower fire resistance by 48. He has access to stop and silence. He has access to sub soldier. He has access to guts. So he's going to be able to do a lot of damage in PvE fire chaining. If you ever get the chance, like if we ever get Delita EX, if that's ever announced, I do think you could kind of put together a fire brawler composition for PvP. But again, that's so far away. We have Asterius right now and Celeste that are super dominant. Let's just, you know, just give it 6 months and maybe it'll be a possibility with Delita EX coming out. Now we're in my favorite section, which is going to be fire element MR units. And honestly, you can make no mistakes here. Seymour is your MR unit god. He doesn't look incredible. Like if you look at Seymour, you're like, okay, he has Steel Heart, he has Steel Time, he's kind of a brawler. You know, what's so good about him? What's so good about Seymour is he deals such a massive amount of damage. He deals more damage than he has any right to absolutely deal. It is almost like someone messed up on his attack stat or on his attack scaling. He is a monster. If you have Seymour 120, like he could slot into a PvP composition. As I've shown, you know, my main PvP composition was Seymour O and Shadow Lynx, and he will absolutely obliterate. He is evasive, he's high damage, he has high accuracy, he can take a hit. He is just all around powerful. And if you're gonna do fire select quest, you are gonna need Seymour. Adelard, very similar, is a monster as well, has access to magic reflex, lowers spirit by 38, lowers all elemental resistance by 25 if you do use Imperil from his sub job. His jamming thrust has crazy ass range. You know, outside of Seymour, Adelard as a support unit and a support fire magic unit is extremely powerful. Then you have Y'shtola, who is free when Final Fantasy XIV ever comes around. She has a crazy amount of magic penetration. She can sub white mage for heals. She has access to 100% hit attack. She has access to both light element and fire element attacks. She is incredibly powerful for an MR mage. Then we have Uni. And Uni is, I would argue, the most underestimated fire unit. I'm gonna say it. He's the most underestimated. He's the fastest casting unit in the game. He has access to reflex. He has 100% hit attack for his job level 25 ability. He has steal time. He has access to Toad. So he could literally, like, I've literally toaded Elena's and Terra's and Celeste's. Like, literally go watch my PvP MR showcase video and you will see how powerful Miche is. You know, not only can he like fast cast Flare really quickly, he can immediately cast Toad. He's just incredible. And even though he's an R-rated unit, he's fast. If you put agility up on him, he is gonna be a speedy motherfucker. Marjorie. Now, I don't much like Marjorie, but Marjorie is still powerful and she's still going to be essential. She is an essential unit for the fire select quest because you need to use her time mage transposition ability to get the kill 3 achievement. She's going to have access to magic reflex. She has spirit minus 30. She's going to be able to berserk opponents that she's casting on, and she has access to quicken. Again, not my favorite unit. She is essential and she's still powerful. Lilith, oh, I love Lilith. Lilith is in an interesting spot because Lilith has access to use the Flame Tongue, which is a fire enhancing kind of flame weapon. She has access to reflex. She has access to sub soldier. She's a breaker. She has 100% hit attack because she has access to sub ranger abilities. So you can utilize her as a ranger, you can utilize her as a brawler, you can utilize her as a breaker. She has a lot of AP breaking techniques in her kit. She is just a universal, like, Swiss Army knife of whatever you need. Now, she is difficult to use. If you kind of don't set her up properly for the mission, like if you don't know what's coming in the mission ahead, she can be, you know, potentially useless to you. So you do have to know how to set her up in order to best utilize her. Finally, we have Naya. Now, Naya, slowest unit in the game, if you didn't know. But she does have access to magic reflex. She has access to full life. She has 100% hit attack with holy, and she has reflect. She's the only unit in the game besides Carbuncle's Esper that actually has access to reflect. So very, you know, even the slowest unit in the game, which is Naya, even the, you know, low rarity MR fire units are all really good. And then you look at these fire UR units and you're like, yeah, they're okay, right? But then you look at the MR units and you're like, oh my God, they are amazing. And y'all, I feel like I'm hyping up these MR units. If you're a new player, like, don't throw a ton of resources into these MR units. I just really love MR units, and I think fire has, you know, fire is what all MR units should be. Fire is, you know, they should all have unique identities. They should all be powerful. They should all be, you know, capable of supporting and kind of building you up as a player. And I think fire does that. What's coming in the future? We do have Valentine's Ildira. Valentine's Ildira, we don't know if she's going to be limited because Valentine's Salir was limited on JP, but then she was non-limited in global. She is going to have access to reflex. She has access to evasion. She can lower single hit resistance by 30. She has CT manipulation. She has access to a 100% hit. She's all around just going to be a very powerful unit. I think people are underestimating her impact on fire. It'll be interesting. I don't think she'll be able to, again, put together that fire composition to make it meta, but she's going to be she's going to be viable. She's going to be useful. It's just going to be one of those situations where, you know, maybe we're going to need another unit in the future. We need that, like, fire select, you know, fire global exclusive unit that maybe is going to pair with her and Terra, right? Raldor is going to get a buff, which will give him that 100% hit buff. He's going to have Pierce and Missile Resistance in his EX. Pretty good, but not enough to carry. Winter Mastery is going to get Defense Pen 10 and Fire Ally buffs as well with her second mastery. You know, not a ton, but those Fire Ally buffs are pretty important. Rain's going to get HP 10%, AoE resistance plus 15, which I think is very important. He's also going to get Fire Ally buffs, and the Crimson Saber, which is his kind of special sword, is going to give him magic plus 30% with its plus 6 form. So Rain is definitely one of these fire units that is going to continue being relevant, especially with these buffs and especially as kind of this tank. This is going to make Rain competitive and relevant, I mean, even in PvP and PvE. So keep that in mind. Similarly with King Mont, remember how I kind of talked about King Mont and Rain are kind of like, I wouldn't say they're the heartbeat of fire, but they're kind of the heartbeat of fire. King Mont, of course, getting very powerful buffs as well. He's going to get an HP plus 10%, and he's going to get all elemental resistance plus 10 in his secondary mastery, which is going to make him, you know, even a better tank, and I would argue significantly better than Engelbert at that point. But that's kind of it for our fire element video unit showcase. We will be going over the final element Earth here in a couple days. We're also thinking about restarting a new series after this, focusing on all the vision cards and espers. So let me know what you guys want down in the description down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.